And welcome to another live stream. This is actually we're gonna combine the daily update and the live stream because I was like, that's what I want to do. But welcome one and all to the live stream. And thanks for joining us. I know it's from people all over. Great to see everybody. And yeah, just working on, let me get all this stuff up so we can talk about whatever updates to the conflict have happened in the last week. So, let's see, let's pop this chat out. Boom. Yeah, thanks all you guys for coming by. Appreciate it. So, all right, we got a lot of questions. You guys probably know the rules at this point. You know, if you have a question, right, you can always, of course, throw it in the chat. We kind of trade off between, you know, covering some of the news, looking at some videos, and of course answering the questions you guys have. If you want to jump to the front of the line, so to speak, you can throw me a super chat. You can also, if you want access to some of the fun emojis, you can become a channel member. What else we got? If you wanted, you know, and as always, check out combatvetnews.com. We're going to talk a little bit about that later as people sort of come in. Oh, yeah, definitely hit the like button and hit subscribe, simply because it's going to tell the YouTube algorithm that they need to show this to more people. So let's, I guess get into it. We'll wait a little bit, right? Yeah, we're gonna wait just a little bit, let people filter in. Good evening. It is evening for some people. All right, I try to find the optimal time here to stream because I have a big European audience as well as, of course, a US audience. So I find that the weekend tends to be some of the best times to do these live streams. Yeah, we're going to definitely talk a little bit about Russian troop rotation. We'll talk about the actual strategy behind Ukraine's counteroffensive. We'll talk about where they're focusing their efforts. We'll talk about the U.S. providing cluster munitions. There's a ton that we definitely need to talk about. Again, I still see people are sort of filtering in, so we're just going to like let people kind of come in, and then we will really get after it. Shout out to Leaf, who reminded me, he's saying hello from Georgia, U.S. I don't know if I have that many fans from Georgia, but certainly the Georgians definitely care about Russian aggression. They're victims of it themselves. Jair Olivares asks, Raid Shadow Legends sponsorship when? Indeed, I've been sponsored by Raid a few times, but not actually since I started covering the Ukraine conflict, interestingly enough. But you know, it's like the law of being an influencer is that Raid will sponsor you at some point. Yeah, I actually, believe it or not, I did apply for a Fortnite creator code, which I recognize is sort of silly, but you know, if you love Fortnite, who are we to argue with it, you know? But I'm still waiting for them to approve it, so don't worry. Once I get it, I'll maybe throw it in the description or whatever. Yeah, okay, wow. People are really filtering in here, which is awesome. I love to see it. We'll give it a little bit, and then we'll start to like kind of crack into things. Yeah, interesting to see the number of people from Europe, right? Slovenia, um, California, North Carolina, Austria. Pretty cool. Okay, thanks, Jacob Andrew. Ooh, yeah, reminding us. While Ukraine is on the offense, Russia is arresting people, not just Strelkov, but others. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the arrest of Strelkov, aka Igor Gerkin, the Russian mill blogger influencer. Jair, thanks. Uh, yeah, maybe my other channel I should do some like Fortnite reactions, right? Or just live stream Fortnite on the other channel, but I'm just so bad. But that's not the end of the world, right? That's part of the fun. And thankfully, the best appeal of Fortnite is that it has a strong elo system. So if you're bad, they just put you with other people who are bad. All right. So what do you guys say? You want to crack into it? Um, so okay, let me pull up at least there's some any good news stories. We'll try to get those up for us to talk about. Definitely be talking about the cluster munitions, and some of the other strategies, right? We'll look up Gerkin's arrest. Hey, thanks, Civil Defense UK. Appreciate it. Always appreciate you contributing to the beer fund. Yeah, okay. So let's see if we can find a good one here. Here's a story from Newsweek, which is not the most reliable source on earth. All right. So let's talk about what's going on in the war. Okay. Here we go. So let's get into it. First off, let's take a look at the combat map, or the control map, excuse me. We've actually, the last update was yesterday afternoon, reporting that Russian forces having some success west of Karmazanivka. So when we zoom out, we can see, let's see how much this is. Actually, that's a substantial surge by Russian forces. Let's see, I think covering, ooh, it looks like from, let's see, from just the edge of this forest out to here. So yeah, so let's see. Okay, let's get a measurement here on just how large in scale this offensive is. So you can see here, 2.7 kilometers. That's actually pretty significant, right? Remember, the entire advance of Ukrainian forces outside of Bakhmut has totaled just 6. So you can see here, here's the furthest apex of Russian lines. Probably here's the deepest point, right? 6.9. So we're looking at almost 50% of the territory flipped by Ukraine. Again, a yard of dirt around Bakhmut is worth more than a yard of dirt outside of nothing. Seizing a couple of forested areas. But there are a lot of rumors, actually, that Russia is sort of preparing a larger scale offensive in this Kharkiv region. The idea, of course, being to not so much that they think they're going to, retake large portions of this territory. I think primarily Russia's goal is to force Ukraine to take its combat reserve and deploy it here in a defensive fight instead of deploying it and having it on standby in the event of a breakthrough around the Zaporizhzhia. We'll see if there's any other like minor frontline updates. Sometimes there's little pieces of territory here and there. You can see again, this is just a minor repositioning of Russian troops advancing along this windbreak here. But other than that, there's not really much reported change. A little bit, too, of Russian advances outside of Bakhmut. You can see them seizing this, again, chunk of wood line here around Bakhmut. But all in all, yeah, just not a... Oh, no, I'm sorry. I have it backwards. This is actually Ukrainian forces pushing Russians out of this forested area here. This is the most up-to-date. So, yeah, I would say that it may indicate we're seeing some signs that Russia's touted offensive effort out here is coming, may be real. It's always when I see these sort of Russian super weapon, Russia standing up a mega army, I always sort of treat it with a degree of skepticism. You know, we saw in the news, for example, that Russia has raised the age of mobilization. In the case of the most senior officers, you can actually be mobilized up to 70 years old. Of course, a lot of news stories taking this fact and trying to convince viewers that it's part of a Russian effort to build an old man army and that it's going to be 70-year-olds on the front lines. Again, raising the mobilization age is a sign that Russia has manpower issues it's trying to solve. But certainly it's common for senior officers to serve into their 60s. So a 70-year-old isn't as preposterous as, say, drafting 70-year-olds to be, light infantry. Okay, let's take a look at the combat map. And what I thought was kind of interesting about this is, first, we've heard a bunch of reports, and even here, this map has most of Robotyne listed as liberated by Ukrainian forces, or at least that the Russian line of contact is south of the town, which is something that is not being really reported yet. Here, you can see here, this actually has the entirety of Robotyne as being under Russian control. So an interesting sort of sign that changing territorial control is not a fixed science, so to speak. You can also see, again, this is unchanged, right? Portions of Staromayorsk have been liberated by Ukraine, but the majority of the town remains firmly in Russian control. But you can see that, again, Russian offensive action continuing, especially on this eastern part of the front line. You can see them trying to advance in Donetsk, but really pushing quite hard north of this Kreminna-Lyman area, and that's where we've seen probably the most success by Russian forces. When we look over to War Mapper, we could see, I don't know what's going on with War Mapper and this like get verified. I don't know what I'm looking at here. Let's see, War Mapper. I'm trying to find their most current map, and they don't make it easy. This is yesterday's, I guess. Here we go. Here's from the 19th. So that's like 3 days ago. Not really. Yeah, you can see just them talking about Staromayorsk, Makivka, Priutine. As we discussed, this is part of a Ukrainian effort probably to pressure Staromayorsk and the route out of Staromayorsk, this white road here, by taking Priutine and then being able to engage Russian forces that try to exfil along this road. So all in all, again, I think this there's again robust evidence that this is a Russian offensive from the north might actually be a real effort, a real combat effort that may require Ukraine to divert some of its combat power to blunting it. Okay. Ohms, thank you for the $5. What's your thoughts on a potential naval onslaught in the Black Sea? Could be a disaster. Naval landings are really hard. Like, they were hard in the 1950s and 60s, in the era before drones, before reconnaissance aircraft. Large-scale naval landings required a lot of operational secrecy, required a lot of speed, and it requires a pretty robust degree of troop training, especially naval landings under fire. But what I would say is that I don't think it's likely that Russia has not necessarily the capacity. They may have the correct number of ships and they may have the correct number of infantry, but what I think they lack is the training and infrastructure to conduct an amphibious landing. And not only that, but when we look at the map, you can see the incentive for a Black Sea operation is limited. And the reason is that the best it could would be like near Odessa, maybe. But like, look at how hard it would be for easy for Ukraine to resupply and very hard for Russia to keep those troops supplied in contrast, right? What you generally want to see in these sort of naval landings is a much safer space for your naval forces to conduct their logistics work. So an answer might be if they could again, there's not really a good answer. Like if you're going to do it, if you're going to open a new front, you'd open it like along the Belarusian border, right? Because Belarus will make resupply easy. So just sort of those are my thoughts, right? I don't think it's very likely simply because it's too technical. And, Russian naval infantry have taken massive amounts of casualties. It's not clear that they have the units physically who can do this sort of thing. Nibush, thanks for the 5. He says, as a NATO member but sane person, I like your content. I worked intelligence adjacent for a decade. I think you are wrong in general, but smile town. Think you are wrong in general, but smile town. All right. Well, I don't know what that means. But thanks for the 5. Yeah, I don't think I think most in general, the assessments I've made have been proven by reality, about Russian issues, about some of the, all of that. So Ohms, thanks for the 8-month. He says, he's referring to engaging shipping. Oh, I thought you were describing like an amphibious landing. Shipping might be a different story. It's not clear how much Ukraine has in terms of ship, like surface to ship attack capabilities. They do have those drones, those seaborne drones, but those seaborne drones seem to be reserved and effective for ships in ports, where they can't really maneuver. So I would say that in general, yeah, I think I think Russia really is putting a premium and a priority on targeting Ukraine's ability to get its goods out of the country. Right. Oh, they still have the Moskva. And you can see here, right, this is geographically these ships coming into and out of Odessa. This is sort of a shooting gallery if you're Russia. There's not a lot of other naval presences here. Turkey, again, a NATO member that Russia probably fears agitating. But I think in general, in this sort of region, which is very clearly like Ukraine and Russian waters, I think the danger for shipping would be considerable. So that I think would be much more effective. Duncanu, hello from Michigan. Thanks for the 20. Hello from Michigan, northeast of heck. Keep up the great work. I trust your analysis, but you sort through all the chaff and provide what makes sense. Salve Ukrainian. Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I don't pretend to have perfect analysis, right? Even the best analysts at the Pentagon with access to classified data get it pretty wrong. But I think I do a pretty good job of calling it like it is. I obviously, consider myself morally, I support Ukraine defending their sovereign territory, but that doesn't mean that Ukraine is above criticism or above making mistakes. Certainly I call out Russia on their mistakes and I try to be honest about what's really happening, right? And I think there's value in that. Obviously, as primarily U.S. and European citizens, right? We have a responsibility when we go to vote to know if the policies our leadership is implementing are working. And I try to at least provide the best assessment we can of that. Blunderboy, thank you for the 10. Knowing what I know about NATO doctrines, the current battlefield activity look like a genuine offensive shaping up, or is UA still stalling for time in just a new way? Okay, my assessment is this, is that Ukraine tried a classically NATO offensive in which they tried to launch an attack against, and NATO doctrine is iffy on this, but tried to launch a large-scale offensive against Zaporizhzhia. The problem is, as we discussed, Zaporizhzhia was the clear right answer, right? If you were given this as a test at your staff officer school, the correct answer is Zaporizhzhia. Favorable terrain, liberating carving your path to the sea would split the Russian invasion and offer real strategic gains. What they failed to do, I think, was account for the fact that Russian forces for months launched no offensive efforts of any kind in Zaporizhzhia and instead constructed what we can clearly see are extremely robust defenses. And the problem they ran into pretty quickly is that a lot of their Western gear got attrited, especially by minefields. And we've heard General Miley talk about this, that minefields are proving to be extremely effective. I think lots of Western countries erroneously believed when they wrote their NATO doctrine that every country they faced would respect the Treaty on Landmines, which says that you can't have long-term persistent landmines. They have to self-destruct after so many, usually like 72 hours. And so when they finally faced an enemy that at an industrial scale deployed long-term persistent mines, they realized just how effective they are at canalizing Ukrainian forces, forcing them into narrowly defined boxes. Then Russia is able to use its air and artillery assets to blunt those forces. And it sort of, I think, forced Ukraine to sit there and go, okay, this classic NATO offensive is not working. We need to find a better offensive. And so that's what I think we've seen. We've seen them transition to more, I would argue that it's generally a shaping operation. I think Ukraine realizes that it needs to continue to piecemeal off these targets. But I think a significant part of what they're doing as well is taking territory, but mostly damaging Russian munitions and equipment. I think so. I'd say, I guess it's transition to shaping operations. I think the goal is simply to grind down more Russian forces and hope that, like good U.S. intel really is going to tell them, hey, Russian forces are at a breaking point. They're at a crisis point. You can push harder in certain spots and you might achieve a breakthrough. But this is this has been a hard offensive. And I think it's been a wake up call, honestly, for NATO forces, like for NATO doctrine. NATO doctrine for a long time just assumed that you would never see large-scale mining combined with effective pre-planned fires, and that you would operate potentially without air superiority. And when you have an organized military, properly resourced, a lot of mines, and good pre-planned fires, NATO's like mech-heavy doctrine really starts to come apart. So anyway, that's my assessment. Thank Rick Hollander for the becoming a member. Yeah, so we talking about solutions. Cluster munitions definitely helpful, effective at breaking up some of these entrenched areas. Again, people are like, "Oh, cluster munitions bad," but like the danger is that they're going to put unexploded ordnance into the ground after combat is finished. But in this case, the places these cluster munitions are likely to be used are already just mined to the uptillionth degree. This is basically nothing but a 10-kilometer deep minefield, as far as we can tell, along all sorts of key avenues of approach. So dropping cluster munitions, not that ineffective. And again, Russia has shown an absolute willingness to throw the treaties against landmines in the trash can. The U.S. would never deploy mines like this. Russia's basically rendered this entire strip of land uninhabitable, right? Without a huge mine clearing operation. Like it'll be decades to clear all these mines out of here that Russia's deployed. So, yeah, I think NATO has failed to account for this. I think F-16s will help. Cluster munitions will help. But ultimately, I think unless somehow the U.S. can rapidly and suddenly scale up its mine clearing abilities, like 10x the number of Mikliks on the battlefield, Ukraine's going to have some tough puzzles to solve. And again, I think it's solving it in a rational way, which is making gains at lower cost to themselves, maximizing costs to Russian forces and, clearing these minefields in a systematic and deliberate way. Okay. Let's see if I wonder if anything is new. Right. Interesting. So ISW has a very interesting assessment of the arrest of Igor Gerkin that I just want to do some analysis of you guys. They argue that his arrest yesterday, it describes as the public manifestation of a shifting balance of power among Kremlin factions to the detriment of the FSB where Gerkin had served. So I guess they are arguing that Gerkin, which is not a crazy argument, remains strongly employed or aligned with the FSB, and that the FSB is likely out of favor because obviously Gerkin is now being arrested. He's going to be held until September on extremism charges. And that it's interesting that they're holding him for a period while I guess the investigation continues, though it seems like maybe this will be like a timeout. Right? Gerkin tried to argue that he is not a flight risk because he's already been sentenced by The Hague. So he's like, where can I go? But they said Gerkin is notorious and strongly connected to law enforcement. So the reasons for his not being able to make bail. Gerkin's lawyer, of course, is arguing that they're prosecuting Gerkin for his May Telegram posts, in which he publicly acknowledged the lack of payments to servicemen in the VDV. But the case was actually opened July 18th, where Gerkin published some harsh critiques of Vladimir Putin. He's been a huge Putin critic, but 18th sounds like he really went pretty far. And also, criticizing Putin seems to be a much more dangerous thing to do in Russia after this Wagner arrest. Right? He is also apparently in conflict with a member of his Angry Patriots Club regarding Wagner. But that is not clear at all. Anyway, I did want to point out, guys, talking about the Ukraine's offensive and about their shaping operations. If you want to see, we just did on combatvetnews.com, actually, just yesterday, I did a breakdown of the full video. No, it should be here. Huh. Okay, well, there should be a video that should have just dropped on the Chechen forces conducting an ambush on Russian forces. These are Ukrainian aligned Chechens. And what's so cool about this video, but it's in the members only section, so like you've got to become a member to see it. And I'm literally booting it up now so I can maybe I hadn't clicked like public or whatever. But what makes it so cool is that it's not a Western style ambush. It's an insurgent ambush. Because there were a lot of Chechens who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. There was, okay, it says it failed to upload. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Let's see if we can get this going. Literally, we'll get it up to you in real time. But what makes this video so cool is that the Chechens, they do all these things different in their... Ladies and gentlemen, leaked footage is purportedly... Let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay, great. So I still have it. So let's get this uploaded. All right, we'll replace the file, and we'll get it up in real time. So what makes it cool is that Chechens fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, and what they would often do is draw on Mujahideen style tactics or Chechen war style tactics for their ambushes. Very, very different than anything that we see here in the West. For example, a Chechen ambush or an insurgent ambush doesn't target, right, the lead vehicle, or it doesn't have this kill zone where you try to disable like the lead vehicle and the trail vehicle, and then you take out all the vehicles in the middle. The reason is because it seems like when you have small elements conducting these ambushes, you run the risk of having parts of the convoy to the front and rear that aren't in the kill zone, and they can become flanks. They can flank your position. So generally, these small guerrilla units will target the trail vehicle in a convoy, because oftentimes, unless that convoy has good comms, it can be very easy to literally have your trail vehicle get snatched up and taken out, and the rest of the convoy may not even notice for 5-10 minutes. We also see a really different way to a different emphasis on actions on the objective. So the Chechens would like go and they would actually take out the vehicle, take out all the crew, and quickly swarm the vehicle, loot it of anything militarily useful, and then withdraw through a different route. Really interesting stuff. Right. Just a fascinating case study in a totally different tradition of running ambushes, and to see it from like a POV perspective is crazy. Again, it looked taken straight from like a Taliban textbook. So anyway, yeah, we're gonna get you the link to that, and it's literally uploading now. It says it's 85% uploaded, so we'll try to get this up and running for you guys, right? Because obviously I told you guys it was going up yesterday, and I didn't realize that we had the technical issues. But as always, I really do appreciate all the people who are members at Combat Vet News. Okay, while this is uploading, actually, let's take a look at there we go. Let's take a look at some of the other stories, especially around the cluster munitions. Yeah, and if you can, right, even if you're not, if you want to help out, you can also hit that like button. Again, tell the YouTube algorithm that this is a good live stream, and that they should recommend it to more people. Okay, what's interesting is, right, the story is that Ukraine has started using U.S.-provided cluster munitions in combat against Russian forces, right? And, of course, Ukraine, here's Al Jazeera reporting that Ukraine Russia's Belgorod governor said there were no casualties reported, but that Ukraine attacked a village with cluster munitions, which seems weird that, you know, just doesn't really pass the common sense test. Cluster munitions are pretty dangerous. And also, there's lots of military targets. So it's not clear on why Ukraine would use them on a random village in Belgorod. And it's interesting to see the sources that are repeating these pretty clearly Russian talking points. But, again, there is consensus, the White House, Ukraine, Russia, there is consensus that cluster munitions are being deployed by Ukrainian forces against Russia. In fact, one Russian mill blogger for Russia's RIA was actually KIA, as well as 3 other journalists in shelling near Zaporizhzhia. There's some rumors that the Russian Defense Ministry has accused Ukraine of using cluster munitions in the incident. But again, it's hard to say. But Ukraine obviously has received the cluster munitions, and everyone agrees that they are being deployed. But this is, again, seems to be a generally agreed upon by all sides that cluster munitions are being used on the battlefield. What's interesting, again, as we've talked about the pivots in Ukraine's strategy, which I thought this story was also interesting, is that a drone is actually hitting Crimean ammunition depots. And I think this is reflective to the commenter who asked about if Ukraine is in shaping operations. This is very much a shaping operation. And I think, you know, when we saw how Ukraine ran the Kharkiv and Kherson operations, they sort of looked at like 2 different flavors, right? The Kharkiv was a lightning NATO style attack, piercing Russian lines, turning Russian forces and putting them in constant danger of encirclement. It was a highly effective blitz type of strategy. But Kherson was also effective. It involved increasing the pressure on Russian lines across the Kherson front, simultaneously degrading Russia's ability to keep its troops supplied. And by pressuring troops logistically and along the front lines, you created this pressure cooker. And eventually Russia itself had to say, hey, we've got to withdraw from this. Even though we're not losing tons of territory, we have to pull back because our forces can't be sustained in Kherson. Now, obviously, the geography of Kherson lends itself to logistics interdiction. Not so much in Zaporizhzhia, but you look at stories like this, and it says, hey, this is a core part of the Ukrainian strategy, is massively, as much as humanly possible, disrupting Russia's logistics system. And you can see, again, Russia out here targeting Ukrainian civilians in all likelihood. Again, Russia just seems to be much more willing to not respect or not recognize the importance of avoiding targeting civilian areas. Anyway, Brett Evans, do you think that Ukraine thought of hooking around the north side of the battlefield to get behind the defenses using the route Wagner exposed? Is that do you mean in and around Bakhmut? Because that's kind of my leading theory. So let's see. So is it a reference to hooking like north of Bakhmut here? Because this is a tough area. I think this is very mountainous and a lot of rivers, and I think this would be tough. Again, you can see Wagner having constructed this very robust entrenching system. I think probably a region like this is somewhat likely, or around Donetsk. But again, it's really hard to say at this point where I think they're going to try to hook around. Or do you mean literally like coming up and around through Belgorod? Because I think part of this is the U.S. has said Ukraine can't use U.S. weapons in Russian sovereign territory, and hooking up through the north like this would violate that tenet. So I think it's probably off the table for Ukraine. Jim, what's best for NATO to learn from Ukraine's tactics? I think the lesson that every NATO planner should be really worried about is the effectiveness of the combination of mines, trenches, and like man pads, right? The way that you can use AT weapons, man pads, mines, combined with just simple trench fortifications and artillery fire. By getting those to all work together, you can actually shut down very high-tech weapons. And what worries me a little bit is that, we in the U.S., we have an $800 billion defense budget, right? So, that's like by GDP. We're going to look. I think that puts us something like here, we'll look up the country chart here. 2023, right? We're looking at, I think this is in billions, I think. So like 800 billion puts us around the GDP of Switzerland, more than GDP of Taiwan and Poland. The entire productivity of Switzerland or Poland is what we spend on defense. And we are already out of artillery shells, like 155 rounds. And what is concerning, again, we don't have more Mikliks to give the Ukrainians. What's worrying is that a lot of the US's and NATO's high-tech G-Wiz machines are able to be taken out by a man-pad that costs 1% of the value of these machines, right? So like you're watching modern fighter jets, which cost Ukraine, let's say $21 million, or Russia $21 million, get taken out by a $38,000 surface-to-air man pads, individual soldier weapon. And that's the same thing with these tanks, right? A high-level Leopard 2 can get taken out by a T-mine that costs $35 or $500. And when you run these sort of math, you realize that a lot of these advanced weapons, if they can't be produced at scale, then they may not confer the high value that they have currently. Like, yes, our main battle tanks are better than any other main battle tank in the world, potentially, but it doesn't matter, because if they can't be produced quickly, then they aren't that effective. And I think it's just a pivot in war away from the emphasis on small elite units, like small elite professional units. There's some wars that just favor them, right? Like the days of mounted combat, right? A knight. It took a professional to ride a horse, don their armor, use swords in an effective tactical way. English longbowmen, for example, right? These were professionals because war was a technical event, and the power of a professionally trained soldier using the most modern technology was highly effective. But times changed as technology changed. And when you saw the dawn of things like the pikeman or the musketeer, suddenly simple technology became simpler, and the emphasis became more about raising armies at scale, right? So that trend sort of persisted for a long time, kind of culminating in like the Napoleonic era. All this to say, that I think the pendulum may be swinging again. It may be swinging away from elite troops with elite technology that's very expensive and very hard to replace. And it may be a sign that war is moving back to large-scale armies wielding simple but effective technologies at scale. Okay, sorry. That was a long explanation. Marked 1. Could cluster bombs be designed to take out minefields en masse as long as the AT mines are taken out? Transports can cross and do the rest. No, because you would need the cluster bombs to land at a very specific density and a very specific high density, because sometimes a damaged mine in some ways can be more dangerous. And so you need to have an assurance that the explosions of the clusters don't create gaps. Because if a minefield isn't cleared, if there's one mine in a minefield, it's not cleared and it's still a minefield, right? A minefield with fewer mines is still a minefield. It has to be verifiably cleared, or an area of it has to be verifiably cleared and marked. Otherwise, it's not clear at all. Okay. Linda, thank you for the 10. Respect to that. What looks like an avocado emoji. I'm into it. Thank you, Stefan. Blunderboy. But the superior Western gear is dependent on air superiority. I think air superiority is a component, but I would not describe it as dependent. I think this is a case of like NATO tactics can work with, like they can continue to run effectively with one or more missing pieces, right? Like you can still make it work if you have air superiority, but you don't have the mine clearing abilities that you need. You can make it work if you have if you have if you have mechanized forces but you don't have air superiority, but you're good everywhere else, right? So like, but the problem that Ukraine I think is running into is that there's like two or more big holes in the situation. And again, this isn't like I call them holes. They're because Russia was tactically effective, right? Russia didn't burn out its air force, and it continues to deny Ukraine air superiority. And they employed large-scale mining operations beyond what Ukraine had the ability to clear. So, like, that is pretty straightforward, right? With those two big holes in the tactics, then the doctrine sort of breaks apart, right? Adrian, thank you. yeah, and again, it's hard to know how much this whole thing favors, like, it's hard to know how long Russia can sustain its level of effectiveness, if that makes any sense. Like, it has been highly effective on this defense, but it has been, by most accounts, very attritional for both sides. And the question is, can Russia gin up forces and equip them adequately, faster and better than Ukraine can gin up forces? That's the ultimate question. That is the $1,000,000 question. So let's see. Okay, all right. I'm trying to get this Chechen ambush video. It says in queue. There you go. All right. If somebody who's a member, can you guys take a look and see if the Chechen ambush video is live and you can actually watch it? Let me pull it up again. I'm booting up Combat Vet News. Again, if you want to support the channel, it is the best way to do it. Any one of these tiers will get you access to the members only room on the Discord and the members only content. There it is. Beautiful. Oh, look at that. Yeah, this is probably the first time I've ever seen an insurgent style ambush. Hitting the trail vehicle, very rapid actions on the objective, really, skirting the, just a lot of, what's the word I want? A lot of tactical risk. A U.S. style tactic involves or a Western style ambush is very security oriented. And these insurgent tactics, they trade off a lot of security for speed. But their speed is pretty incredible. So anyway, guys, yeah. Awesome. Thanks. And again, if you want to become a member and get access to that content, I think that's actually the second video drop we've done this week. But, when there's a lot of good videos, I'll make more content. Okay. Cesar says, can Ukraine improve their capability by adapting square division templates instead of triangle? I'm not sure what you're referring to as square division templates instead of triangle. I can't tell if it's like a tongue-in-cheek joke because so okay, I'll explain what I think the joke is. In NATO, when NATO is doing mapping and planning, generally rectangles represent friendly units. So like you'll be a little rectangle and it'll have like 2 X's will be a division. And the little symbols mean different things. Like a little set of wings is like an airborne division. And enemy are diamonds. So they are, instead of being little rectangles, they're little diamonds. But they have the same divisional markings. And then I think triangles are for like a non-aligned third party. NATO, maps and graphics. Let's see if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, the joint symbology. Let's see if we can find it. Yeah, here we go. Well, no, actually, I'm wrong. So here you go. I don't even know my own joke. Friendly, represented by these triangles in blue. Hostile, square and red. Neutral is just a even square. And an unknown is a clover leaf. So actually nothing appears to get the triangle. Yeah. Literally none of this. Actually, yeah, nobody has a triangle. Which is itself sort of interesting. Right, but here's examples, right? Friendly, airborne, hostile, airborne, neutral, airborne, unknown, airborne. Parachute, 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 air mobile, mountain, cannon, wheeled vehicles. So, okay. Then I'm actually just not sure what a triangle division template is. People are like, lots of Votniks in the chat. You know what? You know what? The Russian trolls, they got to make money, man. They're working on Saturday. I hope they're all getting paid double time. Get time and a half. Stay out of the front lines. That's what I say. If you got to troll my channel to keep from getting drafted, then Troll away, guys. I don't care. We'll just ban you. So, all right, what other questions do you guys have? Because I think we're kind of close. Oh, the other thing I'm going to just talk about, if any of you guys are subscribed to the Strategic Sit Rep, it's the newsletter I launched that has all of the, basically it's just once a week, every Monday, we send you guys the 3 most important, like, national security and geopolitics stories, but we distill out all the clickbait, and we give you guys the context that you need. Oh, okay. It's getting the hug of death. There we go. Literally, I would link you to the site, but it is now so popular that I actually can't go there. So that's cool. But yeah, just sign up for free. And, once a week, we give you just like the really relevant geopolitical stories. Last week, we talked a little bit about the elections in Kazakhstan, right, in which the president appeared to be running uncontested in a farce. So, again, a sign of increasing authoritarianism in the Caucasus, right, or the Central Asia, right, a region that's often neglected but very geopolitically important, as well as some of the issues plaguing the U.S. military. So anyway, definitely want to subscribe for free to the newsletter. Thanks, Marked One, for the beer fund. I appreciate it. Certainly will put it to use today. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you guys for the for joining me, obviously. I really appreciate all you guys. Appreciate the 2,000 you guys that tuned in. Other than that, man, I'll see you guys in my daily updates. And be sure to hit like and subscribe. And yeah, any other questions? I still got 10 minutes, so I'm not gonna like leave. But if you got questions, yeah, throw them out. Okay. Prospect of Russia and Wagner attacking Poland. Okay, this is a good one. Poland is a NATO country, guys. If a power, Wagner or Russia or Belarus, if they were to attack Poland, that would indisputably trigger NATO's Article 5. And Poland, I want to be clear, the Ukrainian military, made up of largely volunteers at this point who weren't in the military before the war, is currently in a dead heat with the Russian military. Now, Poland, a larger economy with a professional military that fought for years in Iraq and Afghanistan, by the way. Like, they're a combat experienced army. Don't kid yourself. And they've been a NATO member for decades. So they are trained up to a NATO standard. That army, if Poland were to become directly involved, it would be a disaster for Russia and for Wagner. So there is a 0% chance that they will mess with Poland and NATO. Now, obviously, NATO wants to make sure that no one miscalculates. That's why they have all their brigades deployed to the eastern part of their country as a sort of deterrent and as a reminder that if Wagner does try to do something stupid, they'll be met pretty quickly. That's also why the U.S. has an entire brigade deployed to Poland as a symbolic representation of the fact to remind Russia that if you're a NATO member, we are willing to put a U.S. brigade on the first square foot of Polish territory is going to be defended as hard as we would defend the first square foot of Maine or Alaska or Florida. Maybe not Florida. Maybe we'll let them have Florida. But you know what I mean. Florida, man, yeah, good luck. Good luck taking over Florida there, Russia. Land. Even the U.S. isn't sure we can fully control Florida. Raven Illook, how can Ukraine clear minefields faster? That is the gazillion-dollar question. I think in the long term, right, like 10 years from now, I think there will be technological solutions that will enable quick, inexpensive mine clearing. I think the 2-year answer is MICLIX, lots and lots and lots of easily deployed MICLIX. Basically they shoot a rope made out of C4 out, and then it lands in a straight line, and then the C4 blows up, and you have a 1 vehicle wide canal through a minefield that you know is clear. I think that's probably the answer, if there is one. They can clear minefields faster. Again, I think the longer term strategy involves some sort of drone or AI that combines a metal detector and looking at signatures of things, and extreme robots that are as cheap as the mine, cheap and deployable as the mines are. So like literally like less than $100 little robot that just takes orders from a nearby computer that it talks to via Bluetooth, and it just finds a mine and just bloop, blows it off. And again, it doesn't need to clear a football field, right? It's got to clear a 12-foot by 100-foot area, or a 3-meter by 100-meter area. I think that's the best strategy if there is one. A lot of people talk about MRAPs and mine attachments. Here's the problem: is that mine attachments, they don't clear the mines in the sense that you and I are thinking of. They blow up the mines in a way that doesn't create casualties or destroy valuable equipment, but it still destroys the mine clearer. So you'd have to come up with a much cheaper and affordable mine clearing option. And that's the biggest challenge, right? Is that, you can't have an advanced mine roller. You can do an advanced mine roller against like the Taliban laying an IED, where there'll be like 1 IED per mile. But when you're talking about 15 or 20 or 100 anti-tank mines, you don't have 100 mine rollers. So the whole strategy becomes ineffective, So again, whatever company can come up with a cheap, effective mine clearing, not just like mine detecting and destroying, whoever can do that is gonna win some big contracts. Because guess what? Even when this conflict ends, there's still gonna be a huge problem of clearing mines from these areas that are no longer in active combat. So that's sort of my thoughts. Yeah, in Mozambique, right? They talk about it. Again, continued questions about a cluster munition clearing a minefield. They're just not good enough, right? Damaging mines, clearing most mines is still not clearing a minefield, right? You've got to create a strip of land where you can be certain that it's free of mines, right? If you have 99 mines in that strip and you clear 98 of them, it's still mined. You still can't traverse it. Because how do you know when you've hit the last mine, right? Like, that's the problem. Even if you've cleared all the mines, if you don't have a way to be confident that you've done so with certainty, then it's not clear. That's the problem, right? There are probably marked one. Interesting. Can a 50 cal detonate an AT mine? No. I don't believe so. Again, disabling it won't destroy it. You have to make sure that you've set off the explosive inside the mine. A 50 cal is going to damage it. It might make it inert, but it may also make it more sensitive. Scanning it with a drone may work, but like as we saw, EOD would often use their little robots to interrogate mines and explosives. Again, it's not a bad technique, but usually the robots, I think, well, you say that. I think engineers would generally blow in place. What you could use potentially is a Mark 19, but you have to basically find the mine, assess it, pull the robot back, hit it with the Mark 19, and then reassess to confirm that it's detonated the mine. Again, a slow, tedious process that works for like an IED when there's like 3 on a route, but when there's 300, it's just not efficient. People are like big steel ball, that's might be an option, but it'd have to be so big and so reliable that it can hit an AT mine and just shuck it off. There's not many materials that can do that. Right, exactly. Mass parachute drop, Martin Ryder points out, but Ukraine doesn't have the air superiority. You see what I mean? How right, like there would be solutions to these problems if you have air superiority, then you can do an airborne drop or an air assault where you just leapfrog over the minefields. Perfect. But if you don't have air superiority and you don't have mine clearing, suddenly there's it's like 2 legs of your table have been taken out. If I remove 1 leg of a table, it'll actually still stand up. But if 2 legs come off the table, it's not going to stand. And that's sort of how this NATO doctrine is. If multiple parts aren't, if multiple conditions aren't met, then your offensive abilities are reduced. And again, it's not an accident, right? Like Russia has worked tirelessly to create these conditions where Ukraine is unable to generate the doctrinally sound offensive power. Well, again, people are like, oh, it's the ape. Benjamin Goodison asks, anti-personnel mines aren't the main problem, it's the anti-tank mines. Well, it's both, right? If a field was only anti-tank mines, then you would just have light infantry go in and remove them, clear your strip and go. And if it was only anti-personnel mines, you would just have a tank with a mine clearing blade in the front to just plow right through it and build a canal. The problem is that AP and AT mines are deployed together. And I actually did a video that Russia released showing how they do it, right? You could see them burying big AT mines, and then they literally just arm and scatter these dinner plate sized anti-personnel mines. And it makes it really dangerous. All right, guys. That is all I had. Again, I appreciate you guys that came by. Appreciate you guys for checking out combatvetnews.com. I really appreciate, again, everybody coming in here. All these really interesting questions, really interesting discussion. Thank you guys for everything you do, being members. And yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow for a daily update. All right. Thanks a lot. I'll see you. Cheers.